bipartisan as political, because the government keeps changing. And it should not be only left to very good civil servants, because it's much more than that. So what's the participation of all stakeholders? And I think in this, including media is a stakeholder here. Civil society organizations which are working on enterprise is a stakeholder here. And integrity is fundamental, both not only in terms of corruption, etc., but whether an organization serves the purpose for which it was created. That's leadership, whether it follows the ethical business practice and systems of management. Rights and responsibility, this includes social responsibility, which we said about CSR indicators and others, and the triple bottom line, and environmental responsibility. Towards the end of the day, a monitoring system, if it doesn't have sense of agency, and this is very fundamental, because you can always get highly paid consultant, come for a week and develop a performance management system and a monitoring system and go back. It will never get internalized. And that's part of the problem in many, many organizations. Because unless agency, who decides for whom and where and what, is fundamental in this. And for state enterprise, this is much more fundamental, because there is a whole issue of political responsibility. Agency is not only technical here. Agency and ownership are connected. So performance monitoring is a process used to understand, assess, evaluate, and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of an organization and its process to decide the strategic priorities and direction. Here, it's very important to have, as we said, quantitative measurements and indicators based on key performance indicators. But so important to have, and I have seen it in many organizations, which is the key word which we use in the organization where I belong to earlier. This is what you call participatory review and reflection. Because it's one thing to have your indicators which will say where it is going. It will not give a lot of sense about why it is happening. And why it is happening requires a whole lot of regular participatory review and reflection. It's qualitative, because those review and reflection helps you to get what I call the business judgment. Indicators can actually sometimes mislead you. Indicators are good enough, indicators are good but not good enough to really take strategic direction. A performing monitoring system enables enterprise to plan, measure, and manage. Towards the end of the day, it's a diagnostic tool. It's a report card for an organization business that provides users with information on what is and what is working well. How do you translate then a strategy into performance? These are the steps which most of you know about. Translating strategy into more easily understood operational metrics and goals, aligning the organization around a single coherent strategy which everybody will know, making a strategy everyone's and everyday's job, from CEO to an entry-level employee, making strategic improvement as a continual process, and mobilizing change to strong, effective leadership. Change management itself is a part of it. I'll quickly go through it. When we develop a performance management and monitoring system, it is important to have a multi-dimensional system. So there are a number of methodologies which is called basic scorecard methodology, performance prism methodology. But 5 perspectives which I thought would be important is, it's so important to look at the bottom line of finance. What's the allocation pattern, what's the expenditure pattern, quality of expenditure, quality of revenue, and monitoring of supply of demand. What's the profit recast, etc. is very, very important. And it's also important to take the customer perspective and internal business perspective. Here, the employee satisfaction index, project performance index, resource management and production management index, and performance capability are very important. But towards the end of the day, an organization gets transformed through consistent process of innovation and learning perspective. The question is whether an organization, enterprise, can internalize innovation within its system. And that's not an easy thing. And is there an incentive for innovation is also a very important point. Many times, if there is no incentive for innovations, and if there is no learning which is being built in the system, organization never transformed. So the transformation of an organization depends on to what extent It has the innovation and learning perspective. And of course, for a state-owned enterprise, external environment perspective is very important. And this is both business as well as political environment. So I will conclude this part saying that Performance Prism has 5 points: stakeholder satisfaction, how the strategies which we are used, what kind of process we use in terms of to execute these strategies, and what kind of capabilities are institutionally and individually. And one of the problems of many of these organizations are, they're excellent individuals in the organization with fantastic capacity, but that has not been transformed into institutional capability which can deliver results. So, like the government, there are fantastic civil servants here and there, but it does not get to translate or transform into capability at the institutional level. And it's important also to see what are the stakeholder contribution and assess as well as acknowledge that. The second part is, by and large, a set of principles which we use in the United Nations on governance assessment. Most of the governance assessment is done, whether it's public sector or a state-owned enterprise, are donor-driven. And one of the things which many of us are resisting is, again, is this donor-driven perspective on governance assessment. Usually, highly paid consultants fly into a country for 2 weeks and then they tell what is the best for those countries. And change will never happen so. So we say that, the 7 or 8 principles, agency and ownership is so important. If a governance assessment, if a corporate governance assessment for a state-owned enterprise is being done, who owns the process is so important. Because unless the members of the governance, the board, doesn't own it, you can get the best of the consultants to develop a system, it's not going to work. And it has to be context specific. One size fits all, corporate governance would not work. What work in Kerala may not work in Maharashtra, forget about it. Because the political culture of Kerala would be different from political culture of Maharashtra or, UP. So it has to be context specific, cannot be a one size fits all approach. The priorities, methodology and choices of indicators also will have to be based on that. And it has to be multi-stakeholder process. And it has to be need-based rather than a generic framework of assessment. And the question is, if we have a governance assessment for a corporate governance, does it transform or does it maintain the status quo? So one of the things which we work in the area of my work is to assist governments across the world to build up the national ownership of governance assessment through multi-stakeholder process, support the capacity development of sectors. By and large, we work a lot on health sector, water and sanitation, and a few other public sector, and increase the policy relevance of governance indicators, and produce research and knowledge product. And I think for the government of Kerala, this is very important. It's very good to have a conference like this. But unless we translate some of this learning into knowledge, process and product, it's not going to get a long-term influence. And it's so important to produce research and knowledge products, establish and maintain high quality and dynamic depository of knowledge. And this is the accessibility and availability of this knowledge is also very important. And I think Riyab has done a good job in terms of putting everything on the web and making many of this information available. So Padma Kumar and Gopakumar did a very good job at that. And raise the understanding and build support among partners for nationally driven governance assessment. This is just a process of how do you do a corporate governance assessment, the steps, because I'm not going into detail to do. But I would say it's so important to have a political economy analysis of an enterprise in an environment to identify who are the stakeholders. It's not a technical fix. There is technicality involved, but it's so important to have the political economy of an enterprise in a context. And then you say, identify the stakeholders, steering committee, all those 10 or 12 processes. And these are not linear processes. It goes to and fro. Those of you who are interested can refer to it later. So basically to saying that, unless these work is aligned with a political and policy priorities, it doesn't work. Because you can turn around a state-owned enterprise, one or two or five. Does it translate into policy alignment and priorities is a very important question. And the methodology will have to be rigorous and it can be replicable. I'm not going to the detail of this technical part. How do you collect data? How do you develop various indicators? And how do you use indicators are these three steps. It's also important to see how do you identify the data producers, whether they are reliable, trustworthy, and they give evidence, whether they improve the usability of evidence, whether you would be able to effectively disseminate this data, and whether it will be able to widely accessed by different actors. And data users could be policymakers, managers, internal stakeholders, civil society organizations, and citizens. Getting appropriate buy-in is very important, and hence the stakeholder process is very important. And what is the incentive to use this information and data? And how do you really improve the dialogue between these two? I will sum up saying that many of this information would be available on this portal which my team manages. It's called www.gapportal.org, where there's a whole set of governance indicators and performance monitoring system to fight corruptions with lots of examples from across the world is available. Let me sum it by saying that a performance monitoring system and a governance assessment is good as long as there is a political will to transform. You can have the best of methods, consultants and system, but towards the end of the day, the transformation of state-owned enterprise will have to be a political project. Because in this particular context, the politics of change and the politics of market will have to take three things into consideration. One is the ownership of state-owned state-owned enterprises will have to be citizens. It should not be the bureaucrats. So it's a political accountability is fundamental. Number two, state-owned enterprise also will have to be able to compete in the market, as our colleagues have said. So it is not just to generate employment, otherwise it will not be able to sustain it. And it should be able to compete in the market with products, with quality, and with competition. Number third is, it's very important to see which are the priority areas at a given point in terms of policy phase, where we'll have to focus and deliver, rather than, there are some areas where state enterprises will have a lot of impact and a lot of relevance, but some areas it may not be the best of way. So let me once again congratulate the Honorable Minister and the team for not only organizing this meeting, but more interesting is the story behind this meeting. And I hope that story will get translated into knowledge and practices, and that those knowledge and practices will be able to inspire and inform and set agenda in India. India requires such kind of stories because there are people who are ready to sell India retail and wholesale, right? And to the highest bidder. And we cannot afford to sell this country and the enterprises which has been built over the last 63 years, which made what it is today. And hence these stories needs to be told everywhere, told beyond India. And I hope this kind of process will inspire change across the world. Thank you very much.
The Jew will invite Padma to the microphone. Oh. Oh. Who's that? I can't read it. Please do. Yeah, yes. Yes. You're next. That's what I was trying to say.
respected dignitaries, I would take just 10 to 12 minutes to run through this presentation on the better governance through monitoring and business analytics, which fits to the theme. Now, this is a story about our work here. These are the challenges we faced: unclear budgets. Not because they didn't really want it, but huge losses forced them to go slow on training, and there was some sort of lack of capacity for scientific planning. Now, coming to social enterprises, some of them had a very unclear developmental role. In fact, in one of the meetings, the minister remarked that some of these enterprises were doing more for its employees rather than the sector, which sent a shockwave across. Now, when it came to performance reporting, it was highly vague. A larger question is that how many people or how many enterprises would like to get monitored? Perhaps that could be a reason. The disclosure was defective. The audits were delayed. And the figures that we always got were provisional and professional. So that was a problem. We had companies which had audit arrears of more than 10 years. At the government level, though there are many agencies, there was a clear problem of information asymmetry. Now, the professional interface between the government and the companies, this was another problem area. The lack of continuity in those manning such positions in government, that was an issue. In some cases, we felt that the regulators or governors were now speaking about problems that the management faced. Yes, they should be aware of the problems and try to find solutions, but sometimes it was more journalistic. Consulting, I think many of the enterprises tried to bring in consultants, but the quality of consulting was appalling in some cases. So for example, we have a company called Telc, and one of the leading consultants recommended to wind up Telc 5 years back. And now we have Telc generating a profit of, the government didn't do that. And we have Telc generating a turnover of $40 million and making a profit of $10 million. So that's the type of the problem that we had. Now the initiatives that we had taken were it was a clear case of interest by the Honorable Minister, who came from a trade union background. Now the budget reviews, the first thing was budgets. The annual budget reviews at the government level. It was always an arm's length distance. Government didn't really dictate what is to be done, but there was time given for the companies to come up with their plans, which were discussed at budget review meetings. The clear directions were given for timely accounting and strong management audit systems, interfacing with the Accountant General, C&AG. We have regular meetings for that. As the Additional Chief Secretary mentioned, we give a lot of importance to performance benchmarking, intra-firm and inter-firm comparisons. So the questions were asked, issues were flagged based on such parameters. High-level reporting. The basic problem is that sometimes even the government gets bogged down into operational reporting. Now we segregated high-level reporting from a low-level input. Strategic indicators, key performance indicators, and operational indicators. So these were segregated. The sum and substance of monthly performance was given to the Honorable Minister for monthly reviews. For the past 4.5 years, I think nearly 56 months have passed. There has been no instance where the minister was absent in these meetings. Personal interest taken in that matter. Now, no interference whatsoever in company management. There has been a problem over years on one, delegation of authority, which was delegated, and the courage from the part of the management to exercise the authority given to them. That's a major problem. Basically because of the lack of clarity in information, some sort of fear creeps in, some sort of helplessness creeps in because of asymmetry in information. So some sort of motivation and mentoring was done for the management to take decisions at the board level itself. The government did not accept, as Mr. Michael Gillibrand had mentioned, KISS, keep it simple and stupid. Everything cannot be simple. We did not accept the argument, TINA, there is no other alternative. Now, in the review meetings, we asked the managements to come up with alternate strategies for implementing their plans. So these were some of the interventions. Now, we are also in the process of bringing in a lot of business analytics models at both corporate and government levels, and I would now spend next 5 minutes on touching upon some of the illustrations on this, in this matter. 5 minutes, I would restrict to that. Now, I wouldn't read through. All along, the IT strategy has been more technology-driven. Now, we are insisting on a business-driven IT strategy. Details can be seen in the presentation, and the handouts will be given. Now, the approaches. Now, identification of key performance indicators. Now, studies are being carried out. We recently completed a study in Transformers and Electricals Limited, Kerala. We believe that at least some part of the resources that the company has, a very, very minute percentage, if it can be used to tone up such systems, that would help the management and the government for improving the quality of governance. This is another illustration. Design of corporate dashboards, which Mr. Michael Gillibrand was mentioning, using state-of-the-art IT systems. We were advocating this for years, but the technology was not at an advanced stage to get it easily. But now I think there are a lot of technologies around for even having a boardroom like a cockpit of an aircraft. So the performance, the changes, so these are all visible through dashboards. Now this is another example of that. This is more for a micro level monitoring of operations. This is another performance dashboard. This is yet another one. It's more for operational control, segregating the high level and bottom level reporting. And this is a tool for corporate sensitivity tests where the strategies are evaluated. So what you see here is a sensitivity analysis using the various percentages given for various inputs and see how the corporate profitability moves. So this is another example of something which we are now working on. Now structuring at user levels, user needs, user source metrics, now going into assessment of trading needs and attending to those matters, and also to bring in optimization of costs by integrating various functions at the corporate level. So these are some of the models. I'm not explaining because of the paucity of time. We are already running late. And this is on the hardware front where we are not scrapping the existing systems which have been built over a period of time. So there are technologies which are available for leveraging on what has already been achieved and to go in for a more meaningful way of addressing the information asymmetry problems in these enterprises. Now, utility of this for corporate governance. Now, these are the variables which are of interest. Strategy, yes, the analytics and the monitoring is doing wonders in strategy, performance management, compliance, communication, and internal procedures. Board performance assessment, we have to embark on that. And these are the areas where there is some utility which are derived based on this. So the whole idea is to also have business analytics as a fulcrum for better governance. Now, I would stop with one more slide. Now, a comparison of timelines. So prior to 2006, most of the vessels, which I mean the companies, were faulty. Non-performing, we had only 10 to 11 profit-making units. And the C, which is the policy across the globe, was turbulent when it came to SOEs. But now the vessels have been repaired. They're performing, and the sea is more friendly. And that's where I think we gather from various speeches, a setting for development and good governance. So thank you very much for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Padma. And as our organiser for the conference, you've set a great example for the rest of the speakers for the day to keep to a tight timeline. So thank you for that as well. And if we could now be followed by Alex, you're our next one, please.
Chair, distinguished discussants and speakers, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank to the organizers for the invitation on this conference. It is a great pleasure to be here today, and also to congratulate to the excellent organization of the conference. I will try to be as short as possible. And let's start. I would like to say a couple of words about International Center for Promotion of Enterprises, which I represent here today. The International Center for Promotion of Enterprises was established by the United Nations 35 years ago. In the period it was a golden age of the public enterprises, and it was established under the name International Center for Public Enterprises with the objective to assist the government of member to facilitate and develop public sector enterprises. But unfortunately, we also share the volatile destiny of the public sector enterprises in the previous decades. So during the 80s and 90s, when prevailing economic philosophy was that good state-owned enterprises is dead, or privatized state-owned enterprises, we broadened the scope of our activities and changed the name into International Center for Promotion of Enterprises. But today we are glad that public enterprises are back on track, so we could continue in the right direction. Economic situation has significantly changed during the previous years, and some old questions about state-owned enterprises require new answers. And the matter of efficiency and effectiveness of the public enterprises was the subject of the discussion a long time ago. And academic reasoning about public enterprises and their efficiency was swinging from the wave of massive privatization during the 80s and 90s toward the massive state intervention during the recent crisis. And however, state-owned enterprises remain significant producers of goods and services in many countries. And it is a key driver of the economic growth in many countries, many emerging market countries in recent years. So there are also empirical evidence that state-owned enterprises underperform their private sector. And the question is, what are the sources of the inefficiency of the public enterprises? Ownership cannot be per se a source of the inefficiency, because a lot of examples, a lot of successful stories of public sector enterprises in the previous years show that they can match the performance of their counterparts in the private sector, and also became world-class players. There are also some prejudice about corruption and lack of disclosure in public enterprises, but corporate scandals like Enron at the beginning of this decade, and also the failure of the rating agencies to appropriately rate the banks in the recent crisis showed that it is not something that is inherent to public enterprises. So actually, McKinsey conducted a study this year which shows that there are some things that are the sources of inefficiency in public enterprises, and that actually eliminating some of these issues can significantly contribute to improvement of performance for state-owned enterprises. And the clarification of objectives and securing an explicit mandate is one of them. It is often that situation that state has intention to join some social objectives to the business objectives of the firm. Then it is also important when public enterprise start some change that it should focus on the scarce resources for highest financial impact, because if the scope of activity is broad, it could fail because of the lack of the resources. And also, one of the critical issues for the improvement of state-owned enterprises' performance is redefining of talent proposition, which actually means that due to the some bureaucracy and hierarchical structure of the public enterprises, it could fail to attract young people to quality people with a lot of ideas the working experience. And also research that was conducted by the ICP for Southeastern Europe showed that it is a critical issue of inefficiency of public sector enterprises. So public performance management can help to overcome these limitations and to improve performances of the state-owned enterprises. And it has been borne in mind that performance management and its introduction could also fail in the private sector. Another research of McKinsey from 2008 showed that only 30% of the employees have benefits from the introduction of performance management, because there is some misunderstanding of that employee performance management means, for example, that it is not just a procedure for the rating of employees, but it should be the overall procedure which should contribute to the improvement of the organizational performance as a whole. And actually, this is a model of performance management known as Common Assessment Framework. It is introduced by the European Institute for the Public Administration, and it is a total quality management model based on the excellence model of the European Foundation for Quality Management. And what is the idea of this performance management system? That instead to introduce some hard indicators which can make some resistance for the employees, to use specifically designed self-assessment indicators and self-assessment procedures. And here is the Common Assessment Framework model. Actually, it has 9 main focal points, 5 enablers and 4 results. And the procedure is that self-assessment groups should give some evidence about what enterprise is intended to do in terms of leadership, people, strategy and planning, processes and partnership and resources, and also what the enterprise has achieved in a sense of results, of people results, citizen-oriented results, society results, and key performance results. And this is a model which is specifically developed for the public sector in Europe. So actually this shows how this model spread in the Europe in 2009, and there is a significant improvement in terms of introduction of this model to the public sector in Europe. However, public sector enterprises could not be equal to the public sector, because enterprises has to be financially stable and has to be competitive. It is the only way that it can remain in the game that they are sustainable. So here is another performance management model. It is a balanced scorecard approach, and it is actually a multidimensional model. I developed a methodology how to use balanced scorecard model.